The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
All right, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, many of our viewers have inquired as to what it means to have bad credit. Legally, are you at a disadvantage? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. But don't worry, we have an expert on set to help you understand your rights as you clean up your hated debt. Next up, a tragic accident in Manhattan left a pedestrian killed when she was struck by an oil tanker in Midtown. When it comes to motor vehicles and legal responsibility, it is not always so clear. So on tonight's show, our attorney and legal expert will give you everything you need to know if you or your family have been involved in a motor vehicle accident. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also, make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Today's Verdict and check us out at bronxnet.tv. Your credit score is affected by many factors, including payment history and the amount owed. How does your credit score affect your legal life? What can you do to clear your debt? We learn more with attorney Abel Pierre. Abel, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, David.
It's always scary when all of a sudden you realize that the credit report that you get in the mail all of a sudden has some bad news for you. How do most people find out that they even have bad credit? What's their first inkling that I have a problem?
The first inkling would be a phone call from a debt collector notifying them that there's a problem. Sometimes they knew that the problem was coming down the line, but a lot of times it's a real surprise to them.
All right, so let's back up for a second. We have three major credit bureaus, right? What are they called? Tell me.
TransUnion,
right?
Experian, and Equifax.
Right. Is one more important than the other, or they all basically have equal weight in terms of reporting whether or not you have bad credit?
They have equal weight and equal responsibility under the law.
All right, so let's, just for the viewers, so they get an idea of what we mean in terms of what particulars in terms of bad credit. What types of things can be on there exactly?
A bankruptcy could be on there. You could have late payments, charge-offs, debt that has gone unpaid for a significant amount of time will be reported on your credit report.
All right, so now you get either a phone call and now you realize I'm having a problem. I guess it goes even further when you're trying to apply for, either to lease a car or to buy an apartment or something like that.
Sure.
What do they do first? What does somebody do first? Let's say they contact you. What's the first thing that you do to try and clear this up?
The first thing that we would do would be to send a letter to the credit reporting agencies in order to clear up a mistake that would be on their credit report. We have to notify them first. We would also notify the creditor to let them know that an error is on their credit.
All right, well, give me an example of the types of errors that you've seen in your practice.
Sure. A lot of times, family members will get their credit reports mixed up, such as a father who has a son with a similar name. Oftentimes, you may have a situation where junior has bad credit, senior has great credit, junior's bad credit ends up on senior's credit report. So then senior would have to contact the credit reporting agencies with my assistance in order to notify them that there are bad accounts appearing on his credit report to no fault of his own.
Okay, now, how long does this take? Well, I mean, you just make a phone call to one of the three bureaus? Do they notify the other two? Walk me through the process as to what happens once you get involved, really.
Sure. We have to notify each credit reporting agency individually in writing. The law requires that we do it in writing. The credit reporting agencies will then notify the creditors also electronically, but in writing as well. The creditors will then either confirm that the information is either accurate or inaccurate and report back to the credit reporting agencies, who will report back to my clients.
Okay, well, let's say, unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be happening. In other words, it's still on your credit report. You can't seem to fix the mistakes. Can you go to court? Where do you go to fix this? Because it does affect your rights to your enjoyment of property and really your enjoyment of life if you can't use a credit card to use different things. So what can you do? What's that final thing that you can do if you need to?
Certainly. Anytime there's a mistake on a credit report, we can always go to court. Generally, we would file a claim under the Fair Credit Reporting Act in federal court on behalf of the debtor or consumer.
All right, does it have to be a particular monetary amount that's owed or that is in dispute, or you can file immediately with federal court? Or do you have to show that you've done your due diligence in terms of trying to get it removed on your own?
Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you must conduct some level of due diligence, meaning you must put the credit reporting agencies on notice that there is an error.
Well, here's what I'm concerned about, because a lot of times there are bankruptcies that many times affect your credit for years down the line, right?
Sure.
So does that stay on your credit report even after, let's say, 7, 8 years goes by? Like, how can you clear up a bankruptcy when you've already paid your debt with respect to the bankruptcy? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
No.
All right. When you file for bankruptcy, you generally have at least 7 years where you can't get credit. Right? You can't get a credit card. You can't get something else. Does it stay on your credit report for the entire 7 years? Does it go longer than that? How does the bankruptcy usually work?
A bankruptcy can remain on your credit report for at least 7 years. However, during that 7-year time period, you can apply and obtain credit. You won't get credit at the best interest rate. However, you can start to rebuild your credit even within that 7-year period. It's a misnomer that once a person files a bankruptcy, they can't get any credit at all for 7 years. You're not going to get a $10,000 line of credit immediately after filing a bankruptcy, but you can start out with a small credit line of a few $100s and ultimately build your credit back up so that you can qualify for a decent rate for either a mortgage or a car loan even during that 7-year time period.
Okay, let's talk credit scores.
Sure.
All right? Good, bad, ugly. Give me a couple. All right, so
right now, a good credit score would be considered anything in the high 600s and above. Really good would be 700 and above. Average would be the mid 600s. Bad would be considered anything in the 500s or below.
okay, so now you have I don't know, 450 or a 500. Do you pay, and you're starting to get the calls, right?
Sure.
So before they even contact you, do you just pay the credit agent? Do you just pay the person who's calling you and saying, well, you owe $1,000 here, $2,000 here? Do you just mail in that check? Will that make it go away, or is there more that you generally have to do?
You have to do a little bit more to make sure that you're paying the right person, because oftentimes your debt will get sold off to more than one company. So the first step would be to check your credit report to see exactly who is reporting the debt. And generally, we determine that to be the person or the company that owns the actual debt. Then you would contact them in order to make sure that you have a paper trail for the payment.
And what kind of paper trail what are you looking at?
We would look for generally some sort of settlement letter, a letter indicating that once a particular payment is made, that the credit report would be updated to indicate that this account has been paid.
Okay, let's get into federal court now. All right?
Sure.
All right, so we're there. Unfortunately, it's gotten to the point where I guess the credit agencies aren't doing what they need to do to investigate the claim, which obviously we're saying is not correct. What kind of evidence is presented in federal court? I mean, you're not kidding around when you're in federal court. So take me from the beginning of federal court in terms of your appearances. What's going on there?
The first thing we would have to demonstrate to the judge or to the court was that we had errors on a credit report. The consumer took the necessary steps to notify the credit reporting agencies of the errors, and we have evidence that the errors were not corrected.
All right, give me an example of situations where there are clear errors that are usually not corrected. In other words, what do you see over and over again?
I'll give you an example of one case I had. I had a gentleman who was very much alive. However, a particular credit reporting agency marked him as being deceased. I asked him, I went through the due diligence. I asked him, do you have any family members who are deceased with the same name? No. We notified the credit reporting agency, and we sent both his ID and his Social Security card. we inform them that this gentleman is very much alive.
He's alive.
He can't get a car loan because the banks are saying that he's dead and they're not going to give money to a dead person. Lo and behold, the credit reporting agency nonetheless ignored him.
You know, people just don't realize how bad credit can really affect your just entire well-being. The things that you can't do that most people take for granted that they can do and they can buy and they can get. If you have bad credit, you're really walking around with cash all the time because you can't use a credit card. You really can't purchase many things.
Sure.
And many stores only allow you to purchase through credit cards or different things.
Sure.
Let's say Amazon. You're not wiring cash to Amazon. So
Sure.
it really just affects your whole quality of life. Okay, some tips. Someone's watching right now. They have bad credit. They're having, a meltdown. They're everything's just in flux. What would you tell them the first thing that they should do if they're watching now?
The first thing they should do is really order a copy of their credit report. They can go to annualcreditreport.com and get a free copy of their credit report once a year and take a look at it. It won't hurt you, it won't bite you, but you've got to come to face with it. Once you look at it, you can make a determination as to whether or not you should begin to at least try to pay back some of these items. Bankruptcy might be the best option for you, but you're not going to know until you sit down and take a look at it.
Speaking of which, is there a certain number that you would actually recommend filing for bankruptcy? What's that debt number in your head that would say, you know what, I think bankruptcy is the way to go here? Is there a certain amount? Because I get asked this many times and I don't know what the answer is.
Sure, it's really based on an individual's income, but the minimum amount of debt that we normally tend to consider bankruptcy would be roughly $10,000.
And so let's say if somebody had $7,500, you might say, no, you can work it out. We can work this off.
If
But
they're
once
employed.
they're over 10, that's where you might say that.
Correct.
All right. Very importantly, where do we find you? Somebody needs to find you. They need you to help them get their credit back. Where do we get you?
Perfect. You can Google me. You can Google my name, Abel Pierre.
Right.
You can go to my website, www.apierrelaw.com. You can also give me a call, 212-766-3323.
Millennials, right?
Yes.
Most are in debt. You find those are the people who are contacting you more than anybody else to clear up their credit?
Definitely. Definitely.
You see that more often than not.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to have a lot more to talk about, but we're done for today. But you're going to come back and discuss it in the future, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
We have to take a quick break, but don't worry, we'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with dachshund breeding.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
back to today's verdict. I'm your host, David Lesch. We are always encourage you to stay connected. Tweet us at today's verdict. Motor vehicle accidents happen all too often, and if they result in an injury, many times you do not know what your rights are. Who pays your medical bills, your loss of earnings? Don't worry, Mitchell Frankel returns to our set to help guide our viewers through the process. Mitchell, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
All right, there was a tragic accident last week involving a pedestrian knockdown, a woman who was hit. Allegedly, she was in the crosswalk. We're not quite sure. It was a left turn case. When we're talking about motor vehicle liability, you got drivers, passengers, pedestrians. You see any one more than the other in the type of practice that you've been doing lately? Or?
Not really. I mean,
It's basically the same?
pretty much.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about insurance because I think our viewers really need to know how important it is that there's some type of fund to collect. When we talk about insurance in motor vehicle accidents, what do we really mean?
Well, insurance covers a few things. First, you have the insurance that will cover your medical bills and your loss of earnings. And typically that's covered through what's called no-fault insurance. And that's something that is provided by the car that you're in, if you're a driver or a passenger, or if you're a pedestrian, it would be provided by the motor vehicle that was involved in the incident. As well.
And that would cover your medical expenses, right? If you're being
Up to
treated.
$50,000 for medical bills and your loss of earnings as well.
Let's talk about your pain and suffering, right? Because obviously, like this woman, she lost her life. But many people they end up treating for months and months and months, right?
Or years.
Oh, years, and their quality of life is never the same. So you're looking for another particular pot, one that doesn't attach to the no fault or to the law or to that vehicle that's paying your bills. When we talk about personal injury coverage, what do we mean, and in terms of insurance exactly?
Well, it's called third-party liability insurance, and that is typically provided by the vehicle that was the tortfeasor, the offending vehicle. And there's all different amounts of coverage, but in New York State, the minimum coverage is $25,000 as a minimum, which, as you know, is very inadequate.
It's very low. I know with taxi cabs, it's a little higher.
For taxi cabs in New York City, it's $100,000, so that is better, still low, but
which leads to a very important discussion involving the ability for you to purchase additional insurance that could really cover you if you're involved in an accident with a car that doesn't have adequate insurance. What do we mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you have a vehicle, you have the option of purchasing what's called UM or SUM coverage, which is if a car or motor vehicle injures you or someone in your family, you can look to your own policy. And when I say someone in your family, someone who's a family member, resident of your household.
And lives in the household.
And lives in the household. And for a relatively small premium per year, you can purchase this coverage.
Let's give us an example. Let's say, unfortunately, you're hit by a vehicle that only has a $25,000 policy. Let's say you're a pedestrian. What would you want on your own home car, which is sitting in your driveway that you might be able to attach to?
Well, you'd want it as high as possible, but certainly you'd want anything above $25,000, which would be the minimum. You'd want at least $100,000. If you can afford more, premiums obviously.
But let's say you had that $100,000 and there was only a $25,000 policy that hits you, you can go after an additional $75,000 against your own car, even though your own car had nothing to do with the accident sitting in the driveway.
Exactly. It's two matters proceeding at the same time. You have an action against the tortfeasor or the offending vehicle that caused the injuries, right? So that's the $25,000 that you're referencing. If that's the minimum coverage. And then you would file simultaneously a claim, and you would want to put your carrier on notice that an incident occurred and that there might be inadequate insurance for your injuries that you sustained. So you'd want to put your own carrier on notice that you have a claim, and if you had that $100,000, like you said, you would have an additional $75,000 above the $25,000 to file and go after to compensate you for your injuries and loss of earnings and medical bills, et
certainly
cetera.
you would recommend, in your experience, to at least pay the extra premium.
Absolutely.
And get the extra, either the $100,000 coverage or $250,000 or whatever it is that you think that you really should have, just in case, God forbid, something happens to you.
Absolutely, and as you know, David, you know, an additional $75,000 if you're badly injured isn't going to go a long way.
Very much.
Doesn't cover very much
All right,
at
so
all.
let's get into the accident site now. So we're on, you know, there's been a tragic accident. The police show up. Why is that police report so important in terms of being able to prove your case, in terms of taking the case as an attorney many times? Walk us through that police report.
Well, it's important for several reasons. One, it identifies the name, driver, owner of the vehicle or vehicles that are involved in the incident, so you can identify who the players are. That's one. And by getting who the players are, it also will help you determine what insurance policies may be in play.
And many times I see, and moving a little bit farther, that description part, which describes how that accident happened. How many times I'm sure clients come to you and say, well, Mr. Franco, that's not really the way it works, the way it happened. I didn't tell the police officer this. Or, you know, I wasn't in that left lane. I was really in the middle lane. This isn't correct. What do you do when that happens?
Well, certainly it's not helpful, as you know.
No, it's not.
It is, you're behind the 8 ball right off the bat, especially if the police officer writes that the vehicle operator number 1 or number 2, whichever one you happen to be, states that, because he's indicating that he took a statement basically from you at the scene of the incident and that he's writing down what you said. Obviously, the sooner the better that you correct. The sooner you go in and correct it, the better.
Can you correct it?
You can go to you should go immediately to the police precinct and request to file an amended police report saying what is in the police report is not accurate, is not how it occurred. You know, the other side will certainly use the first police report to defend the action against you.
Let's talk witnesses. Many times the police report, you flip it over to the other side, you got a list of witnesses. How important are contacting those witnesses early to hopefully prove your case later on?
Crucial.
And how do you do that? I mean, do you send the client there? Do you have an investigator go? Would you talk to himself? How do you usually approach the witnesses? Because we know how important they are. Really.
Well, it could be various ways to do it. Typically, you don't ask your own client to go interview a witness or speak with a witness. You could send an investigator, or you could call yourself and contact the witness, try to find out the facts as they know. And as you know, as time goes by, memories fade. So the sooner you get to them, the better. And also, you can be sure that the insurance companies and their lawyers are going to be looking at that police report, and they're going to contact those witnesses and try to get their statements as well, and maybe put, you know, you want to get to the witness as soon as
quickly
possible.
as
Yes.
possible. You know, let's get into
Bottom
the case,
line.
and I want to talk about 2 particular things that I think are so important when your action is already commenced. One has to do with being able to prove that your injury is considered to be serious enough, and that will decide whether or not you'll be allowed to get compensation. When I talk about serious injury, tell the viewers what I'm talking about, really.
All right. Well, it ties back into what we talked about before with no-fault insurance. You know, years ago, when no fault was installed in, you know, or adopted by New York State, they basically said, we're going to give you, regardless of whose fault it is of the car incident, collision, we're going to give you medical coverage up to $50,000 and included loss of earnings if you can prove it. Okay, you can submit for that claim. In exchange, no matter whose fault it was, you get that. Even if you're 100% at fault as driving a car, you can get medical.
No fault.
Exactly. However, in exchange, I guess, or one of the other sides to that legislation was you can only bring a third-party action if your injuries are what's deemed to be serious or threshold injuries. You know, you may consider them to be serious, but the courts have determined over the years what's serious and what's not. Obviously, there's certain injuries that are clearly...
It certainly would be a case-by-case basis, right?
Yes, but typically it's the soft tissue injuries, you know, where someone's claiming their neck or their back, pain, this, that, where the defense likes to argue these are threshold injuries. You don't have the right to sue. And
As opposed to, say, a broken bone.
A broken
maybe
bone.
Even surgery, those types of things that the court might say, this would be a serious injury, or this could at least go to a jury to determine whether it's
So long as you can show that it's connected to the incident, So if you have a surgery, you know, a month or 2 or 3 later, after the actual collision or incident, you're going to have to show that it actually is connected to the incident, the surgery.
Let's talk defenses, because not every case is a viable case, or even if it is, sometimes the person who gets injured has done a few things wrong. The seatbelt defense, for instance, right? Most people don't realize that, but it's the law in the state of New York. You got to wear a seatbelt.
In the front seat.
Okay.
And well, if you're in the front seat or if you're under a certain age, in the
And
back
what if
seat.
you're not? Does that mean you can't bring a lawsuit as a result of the accident?
No, absolutely not. It just means that the defendants have a defense to your claims. Basically, the argument goes that, let's assume you're a driver or a passenger in the front seat, for instance, and you're in an incident and you badly injure, you break some bones in your face because you slam it on the windshield or on the steering wheel. The argument would go, well, had you been wearing the seatbelt as you are required to do, it would have engaged and it would have stopped you from slamming your face into the steering wheel, the windshield, what have you, and therefore you are responsible for a certain
Percentage of it.
percentage of your injuries. Yeah, because but
But
in
that's
order
fair. Because listen, if it's your responsibility to wear a seatbelt and you didn't, you should
Sure.
lose that portion of the monies that you normally would be getting if you were wearing one,
you should be wearing a seatbelt
no matter what.
whether in the front seat or in the back seat.
And which leads me to my next issue in terms of that you should be in the crosswalk when you're crossing, you know, because that's very important. And if you're not, that probably could also be a defense. Am I correct?
No question. If you're in the crosswalk, it's certainly you're safer for a variety of reasons because you're more likely to be seen by the drivers. You're not darting out in between cars in the middle of a block. But sure, of course.
Tips. Someone's watching right now, their family member, somebody was involved in a bad accident. What would be the first thing you would tell them to do? Let's say they're home, okay? They're home. They went to the hospital, whatever. What would you tell them to do quickly? What would you want?
Well, if at the scene of the accident, they certainly, if they have the wherewithal to do it, take photographs. Everyone has a cell phone these days with camera ability. Take pictures.
And most importantly, where do we find you?
You find me at my website, Sussman, www.sussman-frankel.com. You can just Google my name, Mitchell Frankel, or you can call me on 212-688-8895.
Good stuff. And you'll come back for a third time, right?
Of course.
Or fourth. I don't
Fourth.
know. You've been here so many times.
Fourth.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there's a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at David Lesch at bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure you hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. From myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.